Awesome. Well, I am today joined by Anthony Ricciardi, a good friend who I've known for many years, who we've had the pleasure to work together, who we've dreamt a lot of dreams. We've done a lot of things, and I'm excited for us to finally be talking today.
Yes.
I'm really excited to talk about with you on the podcast because you're someone that has invested in evolving your brand. So we've seen a lot of Rich over the last few years. We've seen different evolutions of the brands. You had a jewelry line. You had major print collections. You dabbled with podcasting. You've completely become a content creator, and you're someone that I'm really excited to talk through because your story is super interesting. I'm a huge fan of your art. I have a ton of your art, but I also think that you're a fantastic case study as someone that does a great job of marketing themselves. And this is not a podcast that's just about art. It's about understanding how to market yourself, understanding how to market yourself without the excuse of needing an agency or a huge team. You definitely get assistance and help, but you're someone that's very much in the driver's seat of your own brand and can teach a lot to my listeners on how to take control of your own brand and to get your name out there, leveraging social media and what you can achieve by doing that. So that's my kind of preamble. I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Love that.
Because you have the best story. So take it away, Anthony.
I am super grateful to be here. So thank you so much. It's been a long time coming. And we've definitely brainstormed so much, and I've learned so much from you. So I'm so grateful. My name is Anthony Ricciardi. I'm a Toronto-based artist. I do work all over the world now, but growing up, I always wanted to become an artist, but it wasn't a viable career. No one said like, hey, become an artist. They have a concept called starving artist. They don't have a concept called starving lawyer or starving anything else. So growing up, it was like something I shied away from, but I really wanted to, as I went away to school on a baseball scholarship, studied finance. So like the three parts of my brain have always been sort of working, like the sports, the finance, and the business, and then the artsy side. So it's definitely I've used everything that I can in like my body and brain to like try all these different things. And we landed here on art, like after many years of trial and error with a bunch of different things. And I've loved all of those like paths and, valleys that I've taken, ups and downs, have led us to today. And I think, just very grateful to be here.
It's so funny because like Anthony's had to tell this story like 300 times. And he is at a point where like, I would even say like in Canada and a lot of people online know your story well, but to me, it's just so mind blowing that you're a D1 athlete. You're like a fantastic baseball player. You went to Alabama State.
Yeah.
You come back, you go into investment banking at like one of the best investment banking institutions or family offices.
I was specifically in real estate investments. So it was a real estate investment fund.
And it was like one of the best.
Yeah, they're like a $3 billion fund. It was a big boy fund, yeah.
And then
crazy.
And Anthony's also colorblind.
Yes.
And has the most colorful art you've ever seen, which there'll be questions on that after. And then just decides, I'm going to be an artist. Yeah. Like what led you to that thinking? How did you decide to make the leap? Was there something that actually changed for you to make it happen?
I was, I'm heavily inspired by my uncle. My uncle was an artist growing up. And so I used to paint with him. We used to go to art galleries. My dad took me to art galleries. I'm very grateful to like be exposed to art like throughout my entire life. And no one ever really told me, don't be an artist. It was just assumed, like, don't be an artist. So when I eventually did graduate and got that job, that was actually a great job. I enjoyed it. I liked the people I worked with. Everyone always asks me, like now specifically, you must have hated your job. Oh my God, crunching numbers. I'm like, I really didn't mind it. Like I actually really like the people I work with. I still talk to them to this day. They're actually a lot of my old bosses and partners of the fund are collectors of mine today, which is crazy.
Super cool.
Full circle.
Yeah.
Really weird.
That's all you can ask for, really.
Yeah, that's it. So it's been awesome on that side of things. But I just started painting as an outlet. It was just like nights and weekends. And then it started like every night and weekend. And then like mornings. And then every single time I had spare time that I wasn't with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, Cass. And if I wasn't with her or wasn't with friends or family, like, for small instances, I was painting.
Cool.
And it just started, I told myself, I'm like, well, what if I just keep doing this? Like, what could happen? I didn't know what could happen. So my entrepreneurial bug I hosted my own little shows, and I would like rent out a venue and have a little party and just do it was all family and friends. I didn't really think anything of it. For tipping points, there was a couple different things. I started to reach out to architects, interior designers, really anyone that would listen. And there was specifically a few murals. I had never really done murals before. I just always told people I could. I was like, yeah, I could do that. No problem at all. I can do a whole entire building. Don't even know what I'm doing. Or like an interior of a restaurant. Don't know what I'm doing, but like we'll figure it out. So I kept putting these feelers out, and small, like non-monetary. So everyone like that thinks like we would leave to go do something for money. Early on, there was no money at all to be made. So I was like, I'll go do this for free. And specifically, like a very, very specific one was one in New York. There was this mural at a new restaurant and hotel opening up. And they're like, hey, like, we want you to come. And I remember going to I had left one job to go jump to another to make more money. And that was specifically the reason I left. And it was like this eye-opening moment in my life where I was like, I left to make more money, but if I left to make 50% more, I'm 100% less happy, which was crazy. And I thought, all I needed was money. Like, if you make money, you're going to be happy. And not saying you're not, like, please go make money. But in this instance, I was set at this like crossroad of like, art's starting to pick up over here. And I had this mural opportunity in New York. And I remember telling my boss, and not that he was against it. He was just like, well, like, you're not an artist. Like, what are you talking about? You're not going to leave work for a week to go paint. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's right. Like, that doesn't even make sense. So I say no. A month later, that opportunity comes back to me. And it was like this very weird moment in my life where it was the night. I remember the call. Like, I can never forget it. I remember the call from the architect. And he was like, hey, that mural opportunity is back. The guy we hired flopped on us last minute. We need you there this weekend. It was the night I closed on my first house. And it was the full week. So not that Saturday, the next Saturday was my wedding.
Wow.
And I was like, there's this crossroads of like life happening right here. I'm like, you know what? Yes, I will be on a plane to New York tomorrow morning. And I left and never looked back.
Cue the montage of all the celebrities that collect your art, like all the places you've traveled all over the world. That's crazy. A great story. And I also think that's great because for anyone that knows Anthony or follows Anthony, his family and his wife, Cass, is such a huge part of his life. So I just think that's so serendipitous and on the exact like right page for your guys' whole life that like the week before your wedding, you're out
like, okay, hon,
painting a mural. Bye.
And I mean, you know Cass Wells, but everyone that I tell that story to, they're like, oh my God, your wife must have hated you. She's like, no, she was super, like,
she's number one supporter.
She knew that like, we're going to make it work. Like ups and downs, this and that, like whatever it is, like as long as we're happy together, all the other stuff will make work. And that's just what we've been doing. And even over the last, that was 8 years ago now, which is crazy, time's flying.
Wow.
Even through all the like ups and downs in the business, and we'll dive into like the creative ups and creative downs. We've just been together. We just figured it out. And just like I said, we're going to make this work.
Shout out to Cass. She's an icon.
Yeah, she's
expecting
awesome. Your
second kid. It's
yes.
So crazy. When is the due date?
March 8th. Yes, coming soon.
I did a guess before this podcast started. I think it's going to be a girl. I think we need an A-Rich, an A-Rich gal in the house to keep Cass keep Cass sane. So that's a great story. I didn't actually know that full story. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So that's, I guess, the tipping point of why you got into art. And I would suspect that you've never regretted it a day in your life.
I mean, sometimes. No, I'm joking. No. Never a day in my life. Like there's always things I want to do more of. Like there's definitely been times in my life where I've gone down paths, whether we mentioned early in the intros, like the jewelry, the prints, where you and I are working on a coffee table book, which we'll eventually do when the time comes. We're going to
be old and gray and we're going to be laughing. It's going to be like huge. A project of a lifetime.
It's going to be amazing. All these different things, like I've never regretted becoming an artist. I've only regretted not doing more of those like certain things or quadrupling down on those like different opportunities and stuff.
That's why I'm so excited that you're here and we're talking through this, because you can't put you in a box as being like just an artist. And a lot of the people listening to this, you're not whatever your day job is. Like you're an entrepreneur, right? Like you're very business minded. And then whatever it is that is your craft is how you kind of navigate business. And what's so cool about the digital world is like you can try different verticals, right? Like you can try offering a different service or a service through a different medium, right? If you're a coach trying a course, a pre-recorded course, or if you're a coach trying a book. And what is so interesting about you is you're just hungry, right? But your medium is creating through an art form that is branded and is like has an identity to it. But you've taken shape through sculptures. You've even tried branching out for kind of your iconic hearts and having like different feels to your art. Even when I first met you, you were also quite well known for that kind of layering like pop art style where you were using like other iconic figures together in a cool way with color. So you've evolved, and like that's what makes being an entrepreneur not only like lonely, exciting, but also exhausting, because like you're never happy. Right? Like you're never settled.
Yeah.
And when you talk about, so there's a tipping point of you getting into art, and then let's talk about your tipping point of when you really became like a recognized artist in the city. Because that's when I heard about you.
For sure.
Let's talk about your risks.
The main thing I did, like, I loved what you said a couple minutes ago, which was you're not defined by your day job. And like when I realized that the last few months of like my career, like in finance, a lot of people outside of like, if you didn't work with me, you probably thought I was an artist, because everything that I was doing around my life was circled around art.
Interesting.
And really all I did was like I broke down my day. And I think that a lot of people need to do this, because I don't think enough of us do this enough, is like really audit like how we're spending our days. And once you realize that like you got to be at work for this amount of time, you got to spend time with your significant other, you got to spend time like eating and being with family. We all have like 1, 2, 3 hours, maybe 30 minutes a night to like really work on that craft. And that's where I did it. And like so during all that time, it compounded over years.
You're banking your 10,000 hours.
Exactly. So while I was doing that, so then when I left my job, all of a sudden that whole entire day opens up and I can think of new ideas. So the tipping points were many. I often think about this, and you know this, like we're going to do this collaboration with a celebrity, or this person's going to buy my painting, or I'm going to open up a gallery here and that's going to be the one. Like that never happens. It's just a culmination of so many small tipping points that lead to this big breakthrough. And I think that's what's happened over the last 8 years for me. It's just been like a small tick, a small tick, a small tick. And although I'm not downplaying how big those small ticks are, just in the grand scheme of life,
you don't have this moment where you're like, I woke up and I'm Oprah.
That's it.
You know, like exactly. Even when, then that's why it's actually interesting to read celebrity autobiographies, because I had a mentor that explained to me once, I thought it was a great point, that there's really only 3 asymmetric opportunities in your lifetime. Like there's only 3 times in your life where you can actually really make a huge upside, and most people don't take them. Right. And so those micro steps that take you to those 3 asymmetric opportunities that bring you into a different echelon or a different range bracket, or exposes you to different people.
For sure.
And when I think about, and maybe it's through my narrow vision of how I got to know you, but for me, one of those was Yorkdale.
Yeah.
And making that decision. So let's go through that.
Yeah. So going back to my entrepreneurial side of me, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. So when I first was leaving my job, and like when I first left, I started reaching out to galleries. And you and I have had this experience, and we can go down a whole entire different tangent on the gallery side of the world.
And we will.
Yeah. So I'm reaching out, and rightly so at that time, like rewind now 10 years ago, before I quit, reaching out to galleries like, who is this kid? Like, I didn't have an art background, I didn't have a portfolio. I didn't really have anything. I was just like, I want to be an artist. Like, here are my 4 paintings. And no one responded, no one listened. So I had to start opening up my own galleries and start opening up my own little pop-ups. So Yorkdale specifically, if anyone's listening that's outside of Toronto, is one of the top luxury retail shops in North America. It's close, like it's up there in the whole entire world. It has like everything that you would need.
Beautiful mall.
Yeah, beautiful mall. And I grew up going to this mall. Like I lived around the corner, so like I was very familiar with it. And one day I'm walking by and I see an opening and I call them. I'm like, it was an empty spot, and I called them. I'm like, Elise, yeah. I'm like, hey, like, how much is it to, I'm a big artist. I wasn't. And I was like, oh, like I own galleries. I don't. And I was just like, I really want to do this. And I think it'd be great. Yorkdale's never had a gallery, which is crazy to me. I thought, well, like, why not? And they're like, okay, cool. It's $50,000 a month. I'm like, what? Like, the number doesn't even like make sense. So that's where the entrepreneur side of me, and like just really thinking outside the box to get to the end game that I wanted to be in there. And so I went back to them and I said, well, I can afford 2 days. And they're like, well, or a weekend, sorry. And they're like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, no, we do like short-term pop-ups, sure, but they're usually like 6 months, maybe a month for the holidays. But like, no, never. We can never do a weekend. And I'm like, listen, I will get all the PR in there. I have no idea. I never dealt with a PR company in my life. I will outfit the whole entire place. I had no money to outfit the whole entire place. I'll get all the art. It'll be a big party. We'll get all the media, blah, blah, blah. We'll sell everything. I promise you, I had no idea how to do any of this stuff. And I was just like, we're going to make it work. And I just really believed in it. And they're like, well, if you're crazy enough to think you can do this, and we're crazy enough to believe in this. And they gave me an opportunity for a weekend. And so on Friday, we opened up everything. On Sunday, everything sold out, the whole entire show.
Wow.
And they're like, yeah, it was crazy. And they're like, do you want to extend till Friday? I'm like, sure. And then everything else I brought in sold out. They're like, well, you want to extend one more week? That week turned into a 5-year pop-up, which is where a pop-up, it was a 5-year gallery. And I was in 3 different locations. And in the Toronto scene, like that definitely helped a ton. Like, I mean, you mentioned like, that's where you found me. And like a lot of like,
which I've got a story for too. But also though, it's such an interesting point because the main takeaway from that is most people don't ask.
Yep.
And I know that it's simple, but I'm blown away by it all the time. Like I even had this this moment myself where this person that was working for us who was basically kind of being handed the role was getting incredible opportunity, bit of a side story, and was working within the parameters that she set, but weren't working in the parameters that made sense for a business. And I just had this moment. I'm like, the reason why I'm putting up with this is because she asked. And I'm like, what a brilliant thing to learn, because like kudos to her. I'm like, most people don't ask. Yeah. And especially most women don't ask. And I'm like, so the main takeaway is you asked. Yeah. And like they just didn't have anyone that asked before. And this was also before those like 2-day, pop-ups became trendy on Instagram. Exactly. Like this is going back to like when this wasn't a thing. So and Yorkdale's also owned by one of the biggest mall conglomerates in the world, like Oxford Cadillac Fairview or Oxford Properties.
Yeah, they're both the same. They're both huge.
And they're huge, right? So like they're one of the biggest in the world. So like for them to have not been exposed to this opportunity, and Yorkdale's like huge. Toronto is the 4th largest city in North America, right? So Toronto's a huge population when you look at the size of North America. For you to have done that at that size at that time and to achieve what you did is why this was like an incredible story, and why one of the reasons why he's here, because Anthony is a fucking killer. Next, the how I got to know you. So I saw the news did a feature on you, and one of so I was at somebody's house and they got a phone call about your pop-up, and they were like talking about it's like one of the cool things to do in the city. It was during one of the colder months when there's not a ton of things to do in Canada. And the feature was like such great timing because it was kind of one of those moments where it was like that network effect where everyone was kind of buzzing and talking about it. And because of the news did that feature, we decided to go to Yorkdale and see the gallery.
It was Dream Space?
It was Dream Space, yeah. And I remember walking through and it was like ominous. Like we went in because of the story. It was this D1 athlete that was a baseball player that was colorblind, that had the most colorful art that is like from Toronto. And it was almost cool because it was like you were unknown, but like being validated by a city and a media, which was more than enough for us to drive out there. So we went out there and I really liked the art. But this was, again, 8 years ago. And I was or 7 years ago. And I was like, I would love to one day own an original Anthony Ricciardi. I'm like, but for now, you know what? I can probably settle with a print. So I picked my favorite print. It was red. It was the Marilyn Monroe. We'll put a photo in this because I still have it in my house. And I was cleaning, I was vacuuming on my stairs, and the corner of my Dyson hit it, and it fell on the corner of my console, and it popped out of the frame, and I was heartbroken because this was like my first piece of art that even though it was a print, it was the first piece of art that I ever bought. I was so proud of it. So I emailed the gallery to get it fixed I went to a framing studio close to my house. I was walking distance because Yorkdale's a mile away it's a world away when you live downtown. Yeah. And the framing studio was like, well, this artist is a fantastic human being. I would just reach out and I'm sure that he would fix it. Just save yourself the trouble of paying for it here and just, see what he can say. Just ask. Yeah. And I reached out and it was you that responded. And I remember getting a response from the artist and being like, wow, I'm so special. Yeah. Like that is such a cool thing that he's responding to me. And so I reached out and I came and dropped it off and we had a great conversation. I remember it. And you ended up saying, yeah, no problem. I'll fix it. This shouldn't happen. I'll take care of this. And you know what? I may even probably be able to drop it off. And you'd send me an email. You're like, you were painting
Was Toy Box at the time? What was it?
No, also the restaurant that you're a part of, because Anthony's an entrepreneur.
Okay, yeah. I was in town. Yeah.
And so you're like, you know what? I'll actually just drop it off. And we ended up having a bite. You were doing like some kind of a hardcore challenge. So we just got like some fries or something to share. And you gave me an original piece of art out of the back of your car as a gift. And I am committed lifelong. It's not why he's on the podcast, but to have Anthony be successful. So I think that's the coolest story.
That's awesome. No, I remembered you coming in for the print, and I forgot that it was because it had fallen. That's funny.
And I was completely prepared.
Yeah.
I was completely prepared, but that's also just what tells you about a good experience.
Yeah.
Right? Because you never know where something is going to lead. And even if it's like 7 out of 10 times it's nothing, or it's like, it's not a 10 out of 10 experience. Like those 3 times, like if you just go above and beyond every time consistently without an ask for anything back, what comes out of it? Right?
Numbers
like,
game.
Just asking. 100%. It's just a numbers game.
Yep.
So
I try to, like, the one quick thing is, like, for a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people starting out or trying to be creative, not only creative, just entrepreneurs. I try, like, to personally respond back to everything. Like, I know it's like there's a lot of, talk about like delegating time properly. And obviously my time is spread very thin. So I obviously can't just spend all day doing that. But there are those gaps of 15, 20 minutes, which I can knock out, whether they're quick, there's probably a quick response, but I can knock out.
Yeah, it was
10,
nothing
15,
over the moon, but it was just you responded.
It's just responding. So like just being, and even on social, like we'll dive into Instagram, but like I think I do like comment back on every single comment that comes to me, and like every single DM
at a
like
stressful
at
rate.
a level. Yeah. Like whatever, sometimes it could have 500 comments or 20 comments. Doesn't matter what it is. I'm going to respond because they took the time out of their day to say like cool or like hearts. I'm like, why wouldn't I do the same to them?
So, and that's where it's like, we're going to get more into this. You just have a brand that's authentic to who you are, but you have brand reverence. Like people who love your brand really love your brand, and they're brand evangelists because of, one, the art is great, which is important, like ensuring the product or service is great. But once that's there, being an exceptional person and going above and beyond is that extra piece you're not used to, which
for sure.
I think is also really interesting for what you've experienced as an artist and a business owner, because it's everything you do is the complete antithesis of what the industry tells you to do, or the industry tells you to act, which is probably a good segue for us to get into, because a lot of people listening to this that are in the professional services or even in product industry that just feels a deluge of like, I need to do more of the same, or I can only look insular to what is happening within my industry or my competitors, isn't necessarily a winning strategy. Like there's something to having a pulse on your competitors, but and why you're here is no matter what industry you're in, you can learn something from you. And like, that's the point of this. Like, let's have more conversations about what people are doing great in real estate's a great example for most industries to follow, because like they're shameless and they post tons of content and it's not specific to what their job entails. Like a lot of it's lifestyle, a lot of it's like selling a story and communication. So let's get into that. How did you decide to become effectively a creator?
Yeah, it came very organically to me. Like I loved, sharing stories, and I loved like just being like in the public, and I love public speaking and all that fun stuff. So for me, it was very seamless to say, I'm going to do this and this is how I do it. And I think that allowed me to like tell my story very organically. And then I just started doing it at scale, because we started researching and studying people and started seeing people, what they're doing. And I don't think I've done it at the proper scale yet, but as I've done more, I'm like, well, why don't I just do more of this? Like, this is what seems to work. This is what seems to get the message out there quicker. And because going back to like the no galleries or representation or managers that I was calling at the time would respond to me, I was like, I got to do this on my own. So I just had to find a way. And social media was that like free, easy to use, very quick, very fast way to get the message out there.
I think it's also relevant for where you were kind of in the beginning stages of your brand with Dust of Gods. Because, so for those who don't know, Dust of Gods was like the coolest, or is the coolest, like leather jacket company. And I'd also heard about them separately. And you guys kind of had like your 15 minutes of like tons of celebrities wearing it, but not tons of celebrities posting about it.
Yeah.
And what you kind of, do you want to maybe dig into what you learned from that?
it was a crash course in the influencer celebrity side of the world. So Dust of Gods was a company created by Antonio Ricciardi and I was hand painting all of these jackets. Antonio was an architect and he's an artist in his own right, an incredible world-renowned artist. And so we would take like it was called Dust of Gods because we would like dust off old garments and create them into new. And because they're all one of a kind, it really struck a chord with celebrities and people that like one of a kind products. So they were buying. We had a store in LA called H. Lorenzo that was representing us or like selling our stuff, and they would buy it out of there. So they would wear it, and we would try to like utilize the pictures, whether it was Demi Lovato or Bieber or the Migos. Like it doesn't matter who it was. There's a lot, and we were like, oh, this is fantastic. This is gonna help. This is gonna to talk about the tipping point. Like Demi Lovato did a whole entire biography video of herself wearing that jacket, and it's gonna blow up, and then you realize that not much changed. You're like, well, why is that? It's because the framework before that wasn't really set into place. We didn't have this like system in place for social media to like actually properly leverage it, and we learned that over time, of course. But it was a crash course. So anyone that like is doing this stuff, it just takes a lot. Like it's just now we can talk about Dust of Gods, but I mean, still to this day, they're doing a fantastic job of getting tons of celebrities wearing this stuff. Is because they have that book. That we're now utilizing that book, and that goes into PR, goes into branding.
No, they have a strategy
now.
And that was I think that's actually more the main takeaway is that like anything without strategy often won't work.
Yes.
Right. And like just having celebrities wearing your items without it being like a collaboration or a played placement where you guys were getting from it was very difficult to monetize. And I talk with big brands about this a lot where I've worked with several brands that have had the Kardashians be paid for not a paid placement, like not it being like an in feed or like an ad where like Kim and Co are like saying like this cup is the best cup, but where they kind of like ambiently like post it or like it's a part of kind of the experience, and it doesn't work because it's not it doesn't come with a strategy. Right. And I think that's also what you learned too at Dust of Gods is that social media can be powerful. You saw the right signalers, but something didn't quite work and click that you needed to take it more into your hands to say, okay, there has to be like a story to this, has to be tied to a conversion point that's connected to my name so that it is.
Or also just takes too long. See, like the Dust of Gods is a great case study because Antonio had the wherewithal and the drive to keep it going. Right. Like I left Dust of Gods 4 years ago now. And he's still going incredibly strong, but it just takes that much more time. Where now we have social media and everything like that. Not that, we could use time in our favor. We can use these like constructs in our favor to speed up time. We shouldn't do the things that we shouldn't look back in the past and be like, oh, let's just do the exact same thing they did. It took them 10 years to build. We could build that in 2 years. We could build that. There's been brands that are built in faster.
Like literally months.
Yeah.
But another great point to that is, and this is another thing that I want to make sure that we don't pass over. What is your goals? What are your goals? And then what is your plan to get there? Because there's nothing wrong with riding something out over a decade and, like having really like evangelist, deeply connected clientele and growing the brand slowly. Like that's a great strategy. And actually it's probably one that you should consider because anything that burns quick, dies fast, right? So, but if you want something faster or now, or you want to see something in a quarterly or an 8-month cycle, it's very important to not look at an Uber or look at a Dust of Gods because so often I'm in positions where I'm like, clients like, I'm going to be the next Uber, but I want to be Uber in, next fall. I'm like, well, do you know how many iterations Uber has gone through? Like Uber still loses money. Like they're not perfect examples.
For sure. But there is this beautiful story of compounding all of the lessons. A great case study, and I'm sure you've dug into it already, is Prime, like Logan Paul's or KSI's drink.
Yeah.
In the first 12 months, they're going to do 1.2 billion in sales. This is what they're projecting. And they have all the biggest celebrities drinking their stuff. And it's craziness. But we can't. So that looks like it was hype. Oh, that was great. They executed it. You can't ignore the last 12 years of what they've done on social media and all the background work and all the leg work and all like the little tipping points that they've done to allow it to happen in 1 year. So for anyone that's doing things, like I look at when I can talk to a celebrity now or get into like a room with a celebrity now, I can talk about the Dust of Gods days. I can talk about all those celebrities. Although it didn't matter much then, if you actually narrow those like 10 years of work into it, you can like and condense it. Now with a strategy, I can utilize it for the best. Then that's exactly what a prime of the world did at scale, obviously.
And even, I mean, the ultimate compound example is, what is Charlie Munger's partner's name?
Warren Buffett?
Warren Buffett. I'm on a roll today. Like, I'm forgetting the biggest names in the world.
You knew Charlie Munger over Warren Buffett. That
I
was
know.
impressive.
I'm racking my brain for the last 30 seconds. Like, Warren Buffett is like the most iconic case study because he like made his billions at like 45. So like, because of actually how compound interest works is that it's like that old parable, if you like, double a grain of rice and it actually only really starts to get to like insane numbers on like day 100 because, or like whatever. I mean, I'm going to get quoted for this one, but the point of the story is that
it speeds up later.
It speeds up later. Like that. And that's a great aspect of, but also on the other hand, the average person that's listening to this shouldn't be discouraged if you've been doing this for 10 years or 12 years, because we're talking about the extremes, right? Like what Logan Paul has built, his product that's going to be like a sugar-based energy drink when he's, boxing with his brother, and they're like some of the most watched YouTube artists, is an extreme. Like if you're a lawyer or a medical spa that is brick and mortar and it can only service a local area, by going digital, by investing in content creation or like just a more modern digital strategy, you can take your brand to the next level, right?
Yes.
And you've already put in those 10,000 hours, because the best are often the worst at marketing themselves. And they don't feel the most confident when the camera turns on, but they're the best at actually articulating to their patients or their clients or their customers why whatever they're offering is the best for that person, right? So
the brick and mortar concept is fantastic, because I think I did an incredibly bad job when I had the galleries. Looking back now, I did an okay job of myself, like getting my art out there, but the actual brick and mortar gallery
experience,
the experience is I didn't utilize social media nearly enough. Like, we got tagged and posted and reshared a bunch,
but not where you're now.
No, it should have been 100x. Like I should have had, looking back, like one of the biggest things I regret not doing, remember we had that dinner a couple months ago, is having events. Like every week I should have had another themed event at one of those galleries. Like there should have been,
or even just different communities rolling in, like
community events. Like it should be entrepreneurs from Toronto. There should be
the Asian Toronto community,
the nurses in Mississauga. Like it didn't matter whatever. Like I should have had multiple nights a week when we were like slower, like Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever it may be. I should have had events in there every single. And I remember the day that the last one closed. We closed in the middle of COVID and we didn't open back up. But then when the last time we closed, I remember telling Cass, I'm like, if I ever open up a gallery again, like a full-time gallery like this, that's all I'm focused on, is like experiential events that are at scale. Because I think that even though it's just a real retail play, you can use social media to drive way more people, because all those people are going to post.
Yeah.
And then the compound starts.
Well, especially too, if you're in an industry where nobody needs your product, they want your product. So you have to create that desire, right? And that comes from tapping into like niche communities and subgroups for them to validate to their network that your product and service is cool, because there's just so much noise. Yeah. Right. Like even talk about art, like, you're competing with not only other artists, but then also for someone to not think that they should go and get a piece of art at HomeSense, right? Like they should get a Ricciardi. And even though that may sound laughable, like there's just so many different levels of buying decisions when you're needing to convince someone in the art space that you're worthy of the four walls you have to hang art on. Yeah. Right. And but also that's like a billboard within someone's home, right? Yeah. Like everyone that has come into my home, it's a speaking point about your brand and your art, and you're an extension of my brand because I identify my home with you. Yeah. Right. And like what an interesting relationship that is, like, and that's why you need brand evangelists. Yeah. Because that's the best way that you're actually going to sell your product. Also, okay, so super interesting that's one of your biggest regrets is content creating. How did you transition into constantly thinking about content?
Yeah. It came as a necessity. Like I just, every time I did something, like we would do a print release, we would do the jewelry, we would do a restaurant, we would do all these things. all it came back to was, okay, we got to get this out to the world. And then I was like, wait, well, how am I going to get it out to the world? Okay, more content. And then I was like, well, why aren't I just doing more content all the time? Like, this is a conversation that I've been having a lot. And it's beautiful that this is, whenever this podcast comes out, but it's the end of 2023 right now, rolling into 2024. It's a beautiful time for us as humans to think about like what we're going to do in the next year. And this topic has been on my mind and in our like brains the last 6 months, because I think I've done an okay job. And that's why we're here talking about it.
You've done a great job.
It just could be done better. And when you start,
there's always more.
There's always more, and not in a comparison way, but like I go to a lot of masterminds, I go to a lot of events like around the world. I like listening to speakers and learning, and you actually look at what they're doing, and the playbook is pretty simple. Like, do a lot of what you're doing. Like, if it's you do podcast clips on TikTok that go crazy, do more.
Yeah.
Like, right? If you know, there's artists that do like the spin art, like whatever it may be, do more of that. Like, if people are liking something you're doing, you should just scale it at the highest you physically can, and then iterations will come. And I just think that I haven't done the best job of scaling at the full rate, because I'm always trying to do so much. And it's a beautiful time in my life where I'm like finally like narrowed down to like just focusing on a couple different things. But to your question, it came from necessity. It was like I needed to produce content to like promote the things that I wanted to do.
I'm so glad you said that, because I've just noticed that so much I do a lot of discoveries, which is more kind of consulting. So like they're clients, but they're not like ongoing clients. Yeah. And they're constantly looking for, like, the biggest thing is like social media strategy. And they're like, yeah, you know, I had 3 really viral videos. This one example, it was like, I have 40 million, I have 5 million, I have 3 million. And when I did some research on the industry, I'm like, why aren't you just doing more of that? Like, that's especially because it wasn't like, they weren't talking on like a news outbreak, right? Where it's like, it's a kind of a one time, and it's gone. It was like a kind of a sub theme within TikTok that like went viral, and then you gave up on the theme, or on another hand, like, boost your content, right? Like, so we had a video that did well, and I boosted it for a few $100 and it's had 1 million views. Yeah. Like, well, that's the best $300 I've ever spent in my life.
For sure.
And it's not like $300 does not buy you 1 million views, may I say.
No.
But
you saw it working and you boosted it.
And you double down into it. And I see so many businesses are investing heavily. They're investing heavily in marketing, but then they're not doubling down when the marketing works. And it's such an interesting point of like, just do more of it because it was working. Yeah. Has anyone along the way, because what you do, this is what's such an interesting point. And I want to make sure that it's not a fleeting point. Why this conversation is so interesting is because there is a handful of people in your industry that create content the way you do. The way that you create content is more akin to like the business moguls, you know, like a Gary Vee or like a Ed Mylett, or like where you invest in kind of thought leadership and inspirational speaking, and like you can talk about business acumen, and like you tie that to being an artist because that's your medium. But nobody does this, and you're one of the most followed artists on the internet. There's people that have more followers, but within the industry there's a very small percentage that has a following count compared to the cost that their art sells at, the houses their art is within, which is why it's really interesting talking with you. Has anybody told you, either before or during, that what you're doing is dumb and you should stop?
That's a great question. There's a lot of like, why are you doing this? I don't think people they hide the word dumb or like, this is silly.
Like, this is not the way it's done.
Yeah, exactly. So like the historic art side of the world is like, you can't do this. Like, you can't. One big thing was like the whole thing about print releases and like how I talk about them or how I'm inspired by them or whatever it is. Like, well, you're going to devalue your art. I'm like, well, that's actually not true. If you look at the history of art, there's always print releases done. So there was that. Once I realized I got over that hump, which was like, somebody's telling me not to make money. This is silly. Why am I listening to this person anyway? After I got over that, it was pretty easy to get over the content stuff, because oftentimes we second guess ourselves. Like, when I started putting out the inspirational content, really it was me talking to the mirror. Like, it was just like when I say like, hey, we need to wake up early, we need to work out, we need to do this, we need to do this. It's me talking to me. And I just happen to put it out, and you're now a third party like ingesting it. So when people started relating to it and they're like, oh yeah, like I totally agree. Like that's, that is true. There was never a time where I was like, oh, this is the wrong thing to do. People are, it's social media, so people are silly. Like I'm sure I get some DMs and
but
comments.
In a professional setting, has anyone been like, this is not the way things are done in the art world?
Yeah, no, for sure. I've had a couple art dealers. I have an art dealer like I spoke to about a month ago based in New York that was like, oh, by the way, if you're doing those like little trinkets like coffee cups and like these things and like you do way too much speaking, like you should be you shouldn't be in front of the camera, like let us do that. They were trying to get the business at the end of the day. Because I think why people say that is the art industry was like, there's so many gatekeepers that are like, this is how you sell art, like A, B. And if you have somebody like me that's like, I could do this myself. Like I've never needed you. Why would I need you now? Or there's a place for them at a certain point, whenever that is. But yeah, I've only had it like once where it was like a little bit hostile. The rest of them have been like pretty like calm or like, hey, like that's a little weird that you're doing, or like they'll just mock me or like whatever it is, but that's fine.
But I think that it's what's interesting about it. So in what I'm about to say, the main takeaway is it has to be authentic, right? And the way that you create and capture content is authentic to who you are as a person and to your brand. And that's again, another important takeaway for this is what's interesting is I feel like I've always just been on the sidelines of your life. Like I saw you when you were training for your marathons. I saw you when you're now pumping iron. Yeah. I've seen you as you've traveled through all these different countries and doing these really cool speaking engagements and the celebrities that I've invited on their podcasts and what has happened over the last few years so that you're constantly top of mind in my life. You're someone that I'm getting kind of those daily updates from. On one hand, that's a great strategy because you're top of mind, right? And when you're in, especially when you aren't where I want to be cognizant of what I say because your art can still be quite priced out of most people's price ranges.
For sure. But
you also have pieces within your brand, which is how I entered into the Ricciardi kind of universe where it's an affordable price point. You have an approachable personality and even an approachable brand, whereas it's authentic to the way that you create content because your brand is approachable, right? Yeah. Even when you talk about motivational speaking, like you have motivational speaking words in all my paintings, in your art. So it's not like you were like doing.
I talk about this stuff all the time.
Yeah,
that's right. Like if me and you just have a coffee, I'm probably going to say some of the same stuff that I say on social.
Like you don't paint Sahara Desert, like vignettes and you're like, hey, inspire yourself, follow your dreams. Yeah. You followed your dreams. That's why I got you to start with your story. So that being a part of your art is authentic. So capturing it is for those who want that to be a part of their art experience.
Yeah.
It's authentic. For people that want vignettes of lilies and zebras and don't want their artists to have a personality, fantastic. There's no shortage of that out there. Yes. Go and get it.
Yeah.
So you're creating content that's authentic to your brand and your experience.
Yeah. It's the only way, I thought this is a really key point there about what to share is I remember, mentioned earlier, my son's name's AJ and I post him a lot. And this was this big, do you know, what's her name's Chiara Ferragamo?
Oh yeah, that's who actually Italy. Inspired my logo.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. Okay, yeah, she's awesome. So I watched this documentary. I said her name wrong, but this documentary on her.
It's sacrilegious. You're Italian.
I know Ferragamo. I think yeah.
Ferragamo. I think you got that part right. Yeah. It's like Chiara.
Yeah. So they did this scene where they were like the media was on her for posting her daughter when her daughter was born. Like, why do you keep posting your daughter? And she said this profound thing to me was profound was like, if I spend so much time with my daughter, if I were to take her out of my content, I would forcefully be putting her in the corner. Oh, and wow. I think that with everything that I do now, like if I take my son out of my content, because I post my content all the time because he's just with me. This morning we worked out together. So I took a picture. He's there, of course. So if I had to fake things, I would have to take things out of my life. Like if I was to not be inspirational on social media, I would be faking.
Yeah.
Because this is what we do. So going back to the authenticity side of things, double down for people that if you're always spending time with your significant other, if you're always spending time at a local coffee shop that you absolutely love their coffee, then post about that because that's the only way to be authentic. You don't have to manufacture authenticity. You just do what you do.
Oh, and there's no perfect science to it. There's no perfect science to this, and it's hard to give. it's like I don't know how to quite explain it, like kind of one size fits all solutions, which I find I'm constantly asked in the marketing space, give me 3 tips to grow my business,
Yes.
tell me how to become an influencer online. For you and your brand, your family is a big part of your success. AJ is named after your uncle who, brought you into the art world. He goes on all of your guys' trips together. He's at your galleries. In what's authentic to your brand, him not being in your content would not be capturing how your content lives and exists. For other people, going to the gym every day is often a part of, or doing some kind of physical activity is part of most people's lives, and they don't post about it. It's not, the message here isn't because you work out, you therefore must post it, right? Like it may not make sense if you're a luxury barber, but if it's a part of your brand and you're talking about it every day to your clients and you do feel it's authentic to your brand, then try it.
Yes.
Then do it.
Yes.
Then try,
great
right? Like, and it's about what it feels right. Like I find, and it's something that I struggle with. So I'd like to get some insight from you on like your process and how you kind of approach shooting content. I find so much of my day, I'm still finding flies by without me even thinking about shooting content. Like the lunch order I order every day, or like I'm reading books every week. Like I don't post the books I read every week. Like how do you go through the process of, because those things I just mentioned, I do think would be a part of my brand. I do think I think my followers would be interested in like, the 3 books I'm reading, or like how the content that I'm kind of researching to figure out how to get better at my craft, but I don't think about shooting it. So how have you transitioned?
I think what you said earlier was strategy and planning. You didn't plan for that. You didn't strategize that was going to be part of your content. And if you said like you were going to do more day in the lives, like if that was going to be your content play or your strategy, you would naturally post all your meals.
Yeah.
You would naturally post. So it comes down to the strategy that you want to do. And I think that would be fantastic for you. Like even to have a sub. The other thing is we don't post a lot of those things because we're worried about what people are going to say. That's the truth of it. Like,
so
I know
true.
me,
that's what I think. I don't want to be annoying.
You don't want to be annoying. So I did this like 2 weeks ago. I looked at like these 4 different, I guess we'll call them influencers in the business space, entrepreneur space that I really like. Bradley, Ryan Panetta, Andy Elliott, Ed Milet, Lewis Howes. I looked at all their social medias, and you can go do it now for fun. The last 3 weeks, every single day, they've posted 4 to 6 times per day. On Instagram, on TikTok, sometimes 8, sometimes 3, but like the average is 4 to 6.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, and I'm like 1 every other day because I don't want to overwhelm people. I don't want to like be annoying. And I was like, well, there's a math here. Like they've obviously found some code that says, not internal code, not like external code. It says like the more I do, the better chance that has to come back.
Yeah, the hack. Yeah.
And so to the point is the root of it is like you're just worried about what people are going to say.
Well, I also think too, and I think also an interesting side point for people who are listening to this that are invested in their personal brand and are at a different point in their kind of digital marketing journey. And this is what's happening for me right now is getting past who's known me for what I was versus who knows me for where I am and where I'm going.
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting divide because who I actually care about annoying are these people that have a past preconception of myself.
Yeah.
Than those who are following me truly in the sense of the word following for who I am right now. Mm-hmm. And when you say, like, Lewis Howes and Ed Milet, like I instantly scoff in my mind because I'm like, well, yeah, like it's Ed Milet and Lewis Howe, but how do you get there?
Yeah.
Right. And if that's your goal, if that's your position to be top of the class in your industry, let's get there together because like I'm breaking through that myself. And that's a really interesting way of putting it because it's been on my list to like really analyze people within kind of a category that I respect and get to know so that I can break through to that next stage. And that was helpful insight for me.
It's just more. And I don't think it'll ever stop. And I think they have a problem with it too. Like I think they have the self-conscious or like, am I doing this? Is it going to land? Because the biggest thing, Gary Vee talks about this very well, is like the biggest thing is we don't want it to fail. We don't want
We're so afraid of failure.
So right, like you know that if you post every few days on TikTok one of your like perfectly clipped out podcast clips
done by Jasmine,
it's gonna snap. Yeah, so it's gonna do very well. the worry is if you did that 4 times a day, would the fourth do well? And you don't want it showing on your page.
Well, even more than that, that's so curated and edited that it's not raw, right? And there's like a vulnerability to saying like, hey, this is my lunch today. And just like sitting there as an individual and being like, who cares? You know, and I find too, people do. And that's where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
It's like, so when I was in Korea a month ago, I posted the story on color analysis, and it was like while it was happening, and I gave some feedback. Yeah. And I've had like an insane amount of, it's become like a topic of conversation when I run into people that like I don't really see very often. They're like, so what'd you think? Like, was it that great? What was your opinion? And it was this moment for me of, even if not many people respond, meaning like DM me back and like give me that like egoic validation of like, hey, this is super interesting. Keep it up. Really like this. Yeah. I told 3 friends about this. Cool. Like, because I don't have that crystal ball and I don't have that feedback, you're sitting there alone and isolated being like, and I'm embarrassing.
It is annoying. Yeah.
And nobody likes this. And then you have these conversations 2 weeks later or never, and you have no idea what's hitting and clicking.
But you do. No, you just said it. Like, so the never one is one scenario. If no one ever came up to you or anyone ever messaged you, say that was cool, then you can be like, yeah, it probably wasn't that cool. That's fine. That's totally normal. A lot of people ask me, like, by 0%, do I do anything really in fitness? Like, I'm definitely not in the best shape of my life. But when I used to run, like I do like Run with Rich or Iron Rich.
Yeah.
I promise you, more people like in the general public. I don't get stopped very often. When I was in Yorkdale, I get stopped all the time because people knew me from Yorkdale. When I was there, they're like, by the way, you inspired me to run.
Wow.
You inspired me to eat better. I'm like, I did that?
Pressure.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's
like,
crazy.
I'm like, and that's happened like a couple dozen times in my life, which is a huge number for someone who doesn't do any fitness content.
Yeah,
so
totally.
It's a crazy
It shows you what connects with people, and it's the stuff outside of the sales.
Exactly.
Right? Like, it's not always the sale. It's not the sales stuff.
Yeah.
It's the like, hey, I'm a human and you can buy my art. You know, like this is what I do to get inspired. But the reason why I was saying that, like, you know, if nobody says to you, there's levels of that when you get more followers. And I have a lot of really successful clients that don't have a lot of followers, you know, because they're older and they didn't invest in social, or they're younger and they're transitioning into a different period, career, or like evolution of the brand. Yeah. And I see a lot of clients who are producing like world-class, fantastic content, but they still only have 300 followers. Yeah. And because it's a numbers game, like when you have 50,000 followers versus when you have 300,000 or whether you have 200 or like 20 followers, the feedback that you're going to get is a numbers game because there's just less people that are going to respond. So don't take us saying if someone doesn't respond because you have 500 followers that it's junk, right?
That's
and
right.
Because you and I are saying it from a different baseline, and that's also important, is develop your baseline. Because if 2 people reach out when you have 300 followers, like that probably
it's a huge percentage.
That's a huge percentage.
That's right.
Right? And like and that's what I'm saying is, for our follower count, when I had 5 people reach out, that baseline to me was like, could be a photo of my dog. It could be as interesting as that. Like, but it also what's interesting is who reaches out. Mm-hmm. So I find another baseline, and this should have been a better indicator at that time. But when I find people out of the woodworks respond, like, and it's,
they've been watching, that
it's not the regular crew. It's like people from like 5 years ago, and you're like, we follow each other. Who knew? But those are the kinds of people where I'm like, okay, this is hitting, but it still took that external validation of having these conversations. And I'm only saying this to say, like, even when you're an expert, you're not perfect. Yeah. And this isn't a perfect science. Like, it's not like, I open up my textbook on Monday morning and I'm like, hey, so this week, recipes are going to hit, like it's what's authentic to your brand and what connects with the audience you're building.
And talking about authentic your brand, you also have to love doing it, because you could also do this with a huge audience and get no love. But if you genuinely enjoyed creating the content, then it works.
So true.
Yeah, you have to. Because anyone that looks at content creators as a whole and says like, oh, that's not a job, blah, blah, it is a very difficult one. It's
exhausting.
It's very exhausting. There's a ton to do.
I quit.
No one would know unless you did it, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
And
it's also a highlight reel, which is also why it's, I think, really important to share the behind the scenes, because when to go back to the point on TikTok, like on one hand, it's like you can just see like overly polished, like well done edited content. And I find a lot of people that probably more of the listeners are like, you know, you don't struggle with vulnerability, or you don't struggle with imposter syndrome, or you know, you don't have difficult conversation with clients, or like you don't like all the things that they don't
actually
see.
happen.
Yeah, because you're just like, hey, here's a polished edited video that did really well, and you didn't see like the 20 times I tried to take that video and it didn't hit.
Exactly.
Or when I forget Warren Buffett's name, she's actually an idiot. But like that to me is also an important point, because on one hand, you can see the overly curated and you forget the rawness of what it means to be human. Mm-hmm. But on another hand, social media is such a highlight reel that you also can't see the 10,000 hours plus that's going into the work behind the scenes. Like you just see the travel, you just see the working on your hook points, like working late at night, like what's going on, but like even the times that you sacrifice to not being with your family because like, and you just see such a polished, curated version that showing that behind the scenes reminds and validates why you're the best. Yeah. And I think those listening that I hope this hits for are people that are, I always use the same examples because when you're speaking fast, they're top of mind. But like if you're a lawyer and you know you've invested 6 weeks, you know, doggedly practicing and whiteboarding for a case and a closing statement you're doing, and you're not showing that work that goes in, you're not showing your value. Yeah. Like you're not showing to potential new clients or past clients or current clients, you know, maybe why you're a bit slower to respond, or maybe why you're a bit busier, because you're not showing the work. Yeah. And just showing the outcome is such a waste on what goes into it.
100%. It happens with me a lot. People are like, they know what I'm doing. Like, always. Yeah, right? Like, so it's a,
he's installing, he's painting, he's traveling.
The beauty about that is a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to show my whole life. The truth is, I think you could say, you know, a lot of what I do. A lot of people know a lot of what I do. It's still a very small percentage of what I'm actually doing in a day.
True, yeah.
Right? You could post, I can post a couple stories of a coffee at this place, but then I was there for 5 minutes.
True.
So the beauty of the takeaway for everyone is just post a lot more, do a lot more, and don't care what anyone thinks.
And test things out. And that's the other thing too, is like, there's just and I'm still trying to figure it out. And it's on one hand, it's like so great to study other people's as inspiration. And I say this a lot, like it's overwhelming, but it's not impossible. Yeah. Right. Like, and it just looks really easy and it looks really glamorous. Like when you have these like highly cut, polished UGC videos, but you have to study how to get there. And you have to make a whole bunch of shitty videos before you get one that looks 100%. Like, and these, I mean, I just use the baddie influencer gal as like the perfect example, because they really kill content creation, but they're just, they live on their phones. Like they're dedicated creators.
Are you saying like the general girl that does UGC? Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Like the it's influencer, the top
hours
of the top.
On the phone is like 17 hours a day.
I can only imagine. Like, cause like I'm working and I'm like, oh shit. And you want to know what's going on behind the scenes? Like, I'm like, I feel like I'm on my phone already all the time, but it's exhausting. And like, that's what it takes to make it big. But again, what are your goals? What is the plan? How are you going to get there? Because if you don't want to be the number one influencer or the number one medical surgeon or the number one number one plastic surgeon, number one medical spa, if you don't want to be the number one, if you just want to be like, hey, I want to increase my sales by 15, 20%, that's a very different strategy and plan than I want to be the number one artist in the world. Yeah. Right. And that's a different dogged commitment. So if you want to be the number one artist in the world, who are your inspirations?
All of those, it's crazy, but like all the people I just mentioned early on about the entrepreneur side of the world is definitely where I've leaned more recently, because I realized that, so I can go list off my favorite artists, like the Julian Schnabels of the world, Andy Warhols, Basquiat, Keith Haring, Pete Mondrian. Like there's a list of people that I'm very, very inspired by the art. But what I've realized over the last now 10 years that I've really been painting, like, 8 full time, 10 years that I've been really painting, is that I love the artwork that I do. It's inspired by so many people, like, it genuinely is. And I've, had my own spin on it now, but I love what I'm doing. So now at this stage of my life, I'm more inspired about the business moguls that have created and scaled incredible companies.
That's what I was hoping for.
Yeah. that's exactly who I'm inspired by. But like I listed off early, like, those we'll call them social media entrepreneurs. They're very real world entrepreneurs.
They're more than that.
Yes,
But, and it's
people
easy to
know them
minimize them.
I'm not minimizing the scale of what they've
No,
created
but it's
outside.
easy too
Yeah.
because you see them on
You see them on
socials.
socials. Yeah. I had a friend that literally didn't know, said something weird about Gary Vee. It was like, oh, well, he's just an influencer. I'm like, he has a huge company, like a multi-national company,
number one,
$100 million. He's like, no. I'm like, what do you mean? Like people don't spend
But that's
time
also why you have to be so repetitive in your content, because there's just, even if you feel like you've said it 1,000 times, you're really probably only repeating it to 5 people. Right. And like, it's constantly new people entering the fold. But
that's who I'm inspired by. I'm inspired by like all of the business moguls of today, the men and women that have created businesses from nothing. And the list is endless, but definitely that's who I'm studying. Those are the books that I'm reading now. Those are like and understanding that art is an unscalable game. Like I'm a scalable game. So like we talked about Jeff Koons, Damien Hirst, Warhol having factories of people just making their art, which is a true thing. They're very open and public about it. So yeah, I could scale my art from that way, but it's a lot better and easier and bigger if I scale me and then allow the art to pump out. Like I can syndicate everywhere, like through video and creation, and then the art will fall into place.
It's funny. It's like, it's so American, like the Andy Warhol like approach, like the Jeff Koons and the Basquiat. Like it's, if like the aliens were to come down from space, like that is like how you could describe.
You know what's crazy? I agree, but I didn't know. So Michelangelo, when he was painting the Sistine Chapel, there was like 200 people that painted that.
Oh yeah, it was outsourced.
He's the only person that gets the credit.
Yeah.
So it's been done through history. No one knew this. Like even Picasso had a bunch of interns.
Yeah.
Da Vinci, there's a bunch of like the new Da Vinci paintings that have come out over the last few years. They don't know if it was him or one of his assistants.
Yes.
Because some of his assistants painted his whole entire paintings. So it's crazy. It just never publicized.
But that's what I was going to say.
It's the American publicization.
Like for Andy Warhol to call it the factory.
Exactly.
And for it to be literally having like printing press replicas of the Campbell soup can is just like very so American. Quintessentially American.
Yes.
But it just shows.
Europeans did it more subtly.
Yeah, literally, they're like, so we're gonna outsource it,
but no one's gonna know.
No one's gonna know. I'm gonna be a god. So I think that the next, I don't know if I want to call it a renaissance. I don't think it's exactly that, but I think what now is quintessentially kind of the digital age and beyond is personal brand investment.
Yeah.
Product by association second. And you kind of even see that with like other big artists like Platon, that's like become like literally a keynote speaker. Mm-hmm. And his whole piece now is like utilizing his experience and how he made his way to the top in photography, but as more like a business case study to like inspire massive rooms of people in crazy industries. Like I saw Platon speak live at an Ontario Real Estate Association conference. And it was a great speech because we're so used to hearing the rise and falls of, blue chip public companies. And it feels so unapplicable because I've read all the books. Like Good to Great is said to be one of the best business books. And I just felt I was like, when is it going to hit? Like, when's the good part going to come? Because I feel like I learned more from Tony Robbins or more from an Ed Mylett in navigating this stage of my career in life than looking at like how to bureaucratically reorganize a company so that we can make bigger returns next quarter. Like it's
for our investors.
That's, I think it's a really interesting shift in where it's going is lean into being a personal brand and connecting with people and then let the product kind of sell itself again more ambiently. Like you're not really that focused on sales in your approach to marketing.
No, historically I was because I had to be because we didn't have this strategy. But then, like I mentioned, like last week I was in Vancouver speaking to a tech company that does real like HR and payroll software based out of Vancouver. And then this week on Thursday, I'm speaking to a big law firm in the city, like at their like company retreat, like in front of their 200 employees. I'm going to be speaking about my story and ways to think outside the box, which is beautiful but crazy to think. Right. But it's so important because people do need those different perspectives. Like the reason why we relate to an Ed Mylett of the world or Tony Robbins, because there is that story. Yeah, they have the business side of it, but there also is a story up and down the person. Exactly.
But also too, like if you own a medical spa and you're selling Botox, like don't sell Botox the way that everyone else is selling Botox. Like sell Botox through a different way. And like that's what you're doing. Is what's so smart about where a subset of your brand is gone. Because I don't want it to, you were just in Dubai last week doing, a small art exhibition. You've not become like a public speaker first. Like you're still doing your art.
Oh, for sure.
But by indirectly selling yourself to a room of 300 or a video to 300,000 people, it's ambient sales, because you're selling your art in a different way. You're not saying, hey, this piece of art is the best. That piece of art is the best is secondary when they've now are completely enthralled by your story.
Yeah.
And that you're colorblind, and that there's like 7 colors that work so well together. And they're like, huh, I've got so many questions. But like when you leave the room and you're like, this guy's colorblind, how is this? Like, that's like my favorite one line. I'm like, so I give them the speech, and then I'm like, and he's colorblind. And they're like, what? Wow, no way. So funny. Because it's a story, and people buy stories.
The last speech I just did in Vancouver, it was like a 40-minute keynote, and I didn't mention colorblind. It's just, I literally accidentally just forgot to. And then that night I went to dinner with the CEO and like a couple of the employees, and they're like, by the way, we looked on your social media, you're colorblind. Why didn't you mention
that? It's like
that?
literally, I want to kill you.
I totally forgot. Super funny.
So I want you just to fear the beast. Like if this ever happens again, because you did it again here. And if you ever, like, I just want you to fear the beast. Like I'm going to come and
just have to mention the colorblind. Like, no, I know. It's super funny. I gotta work into my early story. But
like you gotta like write it on your hand. Like I am colorblind, by the way. That's interesting to the rest of the world. That's interesting to anybody that sees your art.
So talking about not wanting to be annoying, early in my career when all the media that I started, that's all they ever want to talk about.
That's why I went to Yorkdale.
And
it's not because you're a baseball player. No, it's because you were a colorblind baseball player that was an investment.
Yeah. But it was so early in my career. It felt like, to me, no one even told me this. I mean, maybe my friends and family would bug me about it, but like, I felt like I was using it. Like that was the only reason that people liked my art.
Yeah, and I believe it.
And I like sort of dug it in my, like, which is not true. Like it's not the reality, but I was very conscious about it for like many years.
But it's interesting because although it's your story, it's actually the people that are listening to you. It's their story.
Yeah.
Like it's that piece that they leave with, that when they leave that speech and the speech was great and the speech was great for other reasons, it's how they describe you.
Yeah.
And that like descriptor for what makes you unique and different matters, because you can leave and say, hey, that was a great speech. Or you can say, hey, I listened to a great speech by a fantastic artist who is colorblind, who uses tons of color in his art and it matches perfectly. Yeah. And he's transitioned from an investment banking career and being a D1 athlete to pursuing his life in art. Like it's just such a now when you that other person hears the story, like, that's a cool speech.
Yeah.
Like, how do I find this guy? Yeah. Like, let me search him up and
different
just see.
Layer, yeah.
And especially when you hear and he's colorblind, the first thing you want to see is the art.
Yeah.
Because you want to be like, okay, so as an aside, how do you match your colors?
Yeah, so it works in it's a layering process. So historically, when I first started painting, a lot of my paintings would just be like mud. Like, because so what has to happen now is I have to I read blue. Everyone always asks me, like, how do you know what the color you pick up? I'm like, well, I can read.
So he reads.
So I read. So funny enough, I read.
Eyes still work.
Yeah. I always bug people because they're like, how do you see the
How do you know?
I'm like,
well, I read.
Well, it says blue. So I'll pick up the blue and I'll add that to the canvas. What has to happen now and why my paintings are so thick in texture, and as you've seen, is the paint has to fully dry before I add the next color. The only time I really get into trouble is if I have blue in, like, let's say the left corner and I add yellow in the right and they're both not dry and I keep painting. Now, all of a sudden they become like muddy brown and I didn't see that happen. Or like they'll become green and I didn't see it happen.
So you change your process.
So I just changed my process and like I just work in very thick layers. That's why in my studio.
Sounds like a video.
Yeah. In my studio, like as you've been to, like there's like 40, 50 paintings on the go because none of them are almost finished. They're all just like one layer of paint, one layer of paint, one layer of paint. And then just over time they build.
Which is also a bane of my existence because I really want to get Anthony shooting like his process videos, but it's too hard to get there today.
We've tried. It's like, it's so, it's an annoying thing. Like my process videos are annoying because like I just posted one the other day where like the top layer I did and like, so my videographer, Logan, he's great. And we've tried to do where he comes in multiple days to film, but like I'll walk by a painting and just see it and just have a huge cup of paint, just throw the whole paint on, and then I'll just keep walking. And there was no chance I could have filmed that because like it would have been inorganic in that moment.
Sounds like we need to throw your advice back to me. We got a plan.
Yes. So no, and I tried, but this is where I'm going to be like an artsy, like be annoying artist.
Be annoying.
Be annoying artist for a second. When you're creating, like when you're in the middle of creating,
you're right, it's a different mindset.
It is very different. Planning what I say, planning how I do, planning the paintings I'm going to do, all that needs to be planned and prepared and structured. Planning the content schedule and everything where I'm going to post them needs to be planned. But like the actual act of painting is very tricky for me too. And I don't want to be like an artsy, like, oh, I can't, I need to be inspired.
It does
but like
make
I
sense.
do. Because sometimes I'll just like, okay, it's like 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, well, I'm going to the studio right now because like I feel like making this painting. And like I couldn't plan for that. And every time I tried to, I just felt like the paintings that I have filmed from start to finish in my heart are not good. I've done a few and I just don't like them because I'm just like, that felt manufactured.
I don't disagree with once I've heard it for what it takes to be an artist and to do your job effectively. What would be interesting is if you had like maybe it was like almost like CCTV footage. Like
so that Gary Lipovsky, who you mentioned earlier, was he told me the same thing. He's like, we'll just have 6 cameras always set up running. I'm like, that is the answer. So there is a way.
But like security too. So it's like, it doesn't even have to be like, it could be lo-fi. Like the lo-fi could be cool. Like you kind of doing more just like docu style and then like just capturing like you just like throwing a cup and then like clipping that cut and then making a video where like the footage kind of changes and then it being like a delivery piece that goes into like one of the installs could be cool.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So with everything that we've kind of talked about with the marketing and the personal branding stuff, I know like I hate when I get asked these questions myself but I'm going to do it anyways. What have you learned that you could share with who's listening? Whether it's not even necessarily rules to follow, but just in reflection or like in memoriam kind of where to go.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to like looking internally in terms of your time and then more output. So initially, like the biggest thing I've learned through like the content creation thing, social media thing is like finding time to actually like execute on this stuff. Making time. Like genuinely figuring out your day, being very hyper analytical on how you're spending your time, and then finding time to carve out. Because the truth is like we found time to be here today, both you and I, with super busy schedules. Yeah. It was scheduled.
We made the time.
And things happened. We had to move things, blah, blah, blah. We still made the time. We have to look at our day-to-day content. We have to look at, everything. That's relationships with our significant others. That's health. That's all. You have to make time for all of this stuff. Yeah. So I think that it's actually a bigger statement of what I want to say. Like I've learned through content creation and through, marketing and media is if you don't find time for it, it will just fade away. Or if I didn't find time to create events at Yorkdale and all the different galleries I had, those 6 years passed. So if you don't actually find time to do these things, they'll pass. So just start today.
Such a great way of saying it because really it's an investment, right? And it's so obviously an investment, but to go back to what you even said before, like you're also, not only are you investing in yourself, but you're also investing in your network. Yeah. Those that are listening to you, because you're giving them those millions or those thousands micro moments that changes and compounds their understanding of you. Yeah. Right. And so when you're investing in yourself, like I'm investing, like this investment isn't to get like an instant ROI from it. It isn't for someone listening to this to hire me. It's so that there's a branch and web of content with my connections and who I can provide value for that changes and shapes those who listens to our content, that when they see the name Camille Moore and they see the name Anthony Ricciardi, they no longer think of you as an investment banker. Yeah. They think of you as one of the best artists in the world. And that doesn't come from doing a piece of content one day. It comes from deciding to make a piece of content 1,000 times. That's right. And even if it sucks, even if it's uncomfortable, doing it.
Yep. 100%.
Oh, that's such great advice. Yeah. I love talking with you. Okay. So I just want to quickly talk about art because
Well, we do that too.
We talk about art all the time. I mean, I'm a little bit more opinionated than Anthony is. But let's talk about old school versus new school.
Yeah.
So if we did have any artists that were listening, anyone that wanted to get to know the art industry, let's just get right into it. What are the most frustrating parts about the old school? What's the most frustrating parts about the new school?
Yeah, and
how would you describe it, I guess?
Rolled into the new school as well. Like, I mean, the school of gallery versus the school of entrepreneur is very, very different. So there's historically been like, the reason that there's such thing as a starving artist was a term is because you can only sell art through galleries historically. So that's through the 70s and 80s. Like that's when that term was coined, 70s, 80s, early 90s. You had to be represented by a third-party gallery in order to sell anything. No one would just buy directly from an artist. The wave of media and
to really make it,
like to actually have a career, like to actually be sustainable, to like not be starving. You needed a gallery to do it. And then unfortunately, there was only a few galleries that actually knew what they were doing. So the numbers just kept getting pinched.
And you're also being validated by a subjective, isolated opinion, opposed to having 50,000 people being like, this is great art on Instagram.
Exactly. So the wave of media, and then specifically social media, has just broken all of those boundaries. So my direct experience with galleries has been, up until a few months ago. I'm in one gallery right now, which is in Sydney, Australia, who has been fantastic. Josh and Audrey there, so it's called Audrey Fine Art. They've been absolutely fantastic. And that was the first time, like I've spoken to many galleries over the years, and all of them were either everyone's been to a gallery before probably that walked in and like no one said hi. Like was my experience, like as the artist that could sell for them, knowing that like my art on your wall would probably sell more than the art that's on this wall right now. And me knowing that, or even worse, you've been to my house, I'm an art collector. Like I want to buy this art. Like the experience that I've had going into galleries historically, globally, is atrocious. Like it's just very pretentious. It's very, they know something we don't know, which is nothing at all. And so my experience as a whole with galleries has not been great. But in saying that, that's why I had to carve my own path. So the new school, so when you talk about new school versus old school, like a lot more artists are taking this path and direction to self-promotion, and then like music has done this very well. So music has a bigger voice in terms of the independent artists versus the labels. And we've seen it now happen with many, many people going against their labels, buying back their rights.
Yeah, Taylor Swift,
huge. Like, so that's been a way, but the same in art, right? Like all of these music artists were gate kept by like all of like, the labels.
It's exactly the same.
To get into the radios.
Yeah,
and
it's exactly the same. Literally, it's literally exactly the same. It is exactly
the same. So it's exactly, but now there's such things as independent labels or independent artists that have done, like Russ is a rapper that I love, and he 100% independent and has sold hundreds of millions of records around the world, he has sold out shows around the world, does everything by himself. I'm like, it's the proof that you can. So you don't need this anymore. And social media and content is the catalyst to all of that.
And it's funny because it's not, neither is easy, but it's definitely not easier. Right. And
yeah,
because don't like, you want to get to that level faster, but you actually have to slog it a bit longer, because in order to beat the established institutions, you got to ride it out.
For sure.
Like you got to prove it. Like you got to actually show that you're different, and because people don't like change, especially
no, for sure, because
old school industries.
Yeah, and old school industries, and also old school buyers, and that doesn't mean old people or young people. It means people with like more classical buying habits,
preconceived ideas,
right? So like they want to go into a gallery, they want a third party person to tell them like this is the art to buy. Whereas like, not only would I give you a better price if you just bought my art from a gallery or here, that's ignoring the point. But like, why is it that I can't speak about my art, but them speaking about my art makes it more valuable? It is a historic thing, and no one's solved that yet. But I think through storytelling and content and all the stuff, they can come to their own conclusion that I'd rather speak to Anthony, and if he's creating a custom piece for my house, I'd rather know the feeling and love that he put into it. Or if I do that, I create custom pieces for people's homes all the time, and like I get to speak with them, and like maybe I'll hide in like very subtly their daughter's birthday or like whatever it is, and it won't be something that you see, but you get close to the painting and it's there. So there's different things like that I'm able to do as a singular artist, which has benefited me by not being in galleries. So the back end benefit of all of that is like we mentioned Dubai, we mentioned Miami, we mentioned Vancouver. If I was in a gallery, I couldn't do any of those shows. Those were like small pop-ups. I don't want to say small, like they were big, but like they were like very low-key 1 week pop-ups at the other side of the world. If I was represented by a gallery, like globally everywhere, I would not have been able to do that. Exactly. They would have been like, what are you doing? Or they would have been all over it and wanted money and like blah, blah, whatever.
But I think it's also interesting though with how the world is changing, right? With how much consumerism and purchasing of higher ticket items are happening digitally, like in a different way. So for so long, art, especially at your level, was an investment piece. It was an investment class. It was in order to like to store wealth as an asset. And that's really why you would buy Picassos or you'd buy like big name artists. Is it's a store of value. So it's a commodity, right? So, but what's interesting, especially with kind of the rise of street art, and it's probably can be penned back from like the Andy Warhols and the Jeff Koons, and because he invested in tons of prints. Without getting to like geopolitical and macroeconomics, like the average household income has increased. People have more disposable income and they're spending it on less things that they need, they want, and are as focused on saving. So things like one of one art pieces are, or even just the category of art has completely expanded. I was at Holt Renfrew this past weekend and they had the bear bricks.
The bear bricks everywhere, yep.
But
I'm talking to them doing a pop-up in Holt's.
But it literally feels,
exactly.
but like when I was looking at the bear bricks, I'm like, how is this $2,500? Like this just feels to me like a large Lego, like because it was sitting on the floor in the back corner of a department store without the signals of like, this is a thing. Like it was so shoved in a corner, and had I not had like seen it, cause it's not really, I like street art. I like kind of that world. I've seen the bear brick, but to me, it's more the cause figures. When I think about the figurines, is like more what comes to mind, more iconic. And I'm like, it's so interesting.
But placement is incredible. So there's this beautiful speech by Virgil Abloh. He unfortunately passed away, but he was an incredible creative director. And he says this story about a stapler. And he said, if I take this stapler and I put it in an office, it's a stapler. But if I take this stapler and put it on a crystal pedestal and I put it in a white room with lights facing it, it's now a sculpture. Like nothing changed but the surroundings around it. And I think that's extremely beautiful and profound to everything that we're doing. If you put it in the right setting, it's a piece of art. It's
also the problem with luxury goods these days.
That's right.
Like it's also the fall from grace when Louis Vuitton is saying that for what Louis Vuitton is doing. Cause like their little figurines are also kind of cause bear bricks. Do you know what they're called?
I don't know the names. I know your.
They're like flower head things. I mean, I should know, but I don't. That's a really interesting part. Like what trends do you think are coming in the art scene?
I think that like a lot of the trends that started on the back of social media. So there's good and bad in social media. A lot of social media created people just creating art for the likes of it, meaning not the art, what it ended with, like the process driven videos where it's just spinning. Like spin art's been around forever, but like if it's just like a spin painting or a splash painting, they're just doing it for like the shock value of the video. I don't think that trend of like people just there for shock value, not for the story, not for the artist, not for the actual ending version of the painting will last. And I think that this version, like what we're talking about, is having true depth, true story, true, historic value in everything that we're doing. I think that'll continue to rise, and content will be everything.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, because you can't, it's really hard as a human being to understand time. Like time is such an impossible construct.
Yeah.
I just finished Life on This Planet on Netflix, and it's just,
I haven't seen it.
It's really good.
Yeah.
But I love those subtle reminders of how long the planet has existed, how long things before humans even showed up we're
a blip. We're a decimal.
We're literally nothing. And that's what's so interesting about this series is like, it's like the last episode's about humans, because how small like their relevance is to
scale,
like to the history of the world.
Yeah.
But we're often so focused on short-term gains. And that's my criticism of luxury, is that they've lost the plot when it comes to investing in decades, right? Like if you're a brand like Hermes that's been around for over 120 years, you can't be chasing next quarter sales, right? Like it can matter to a point, but like it has to be a longer term goal. And when you talk about the fleeting art style, because it's almost mesmerizing, or like is ASMR because that's what the algorithm and like for the current moment we get distracted by. But if it's not investing in something that's going to be worth a store of value for another 10 years, it's probably not going to last
in any segment, in any industry.
And there's no storytelling to it. I think that's actually a great point. Like, I mean, to be me and to call somebody out, I like the way that Punk Me Tender's art looks.
Yeah.
Like aesthetically, I'd really like to have a butterfly in my house, but I haven't pulled the trigger because I don't know his story. I don't know anything about him. There was like one time they did like a Vogue video, and I don't think that he was actually portrayed in the best light. And maybe that's him, but I don't feel like I actually can make a proper judgment on the artist. And when I'm going to make an investment in a piece of art that's somewhat reasonable to, a middle class, upper middle class individual, like we're not talking about like Monet and like let's say doable, consumable art, like still an investment, but like consumable. If I don't know that story and you're just being validated by an art gallery that I somewhat like, it's harder for me to make the buying decision to do so. Like I got to know you, I got to know you as an artist, and I don't really have much art. The only art that I have are, I have a piece by Ken Harrison, who's a fantastic Canadian artist. And the only reason why I got it is because it allowed me to fall in love with Canadian art. I actually almost like always minimalized it and like wanted to write it off because I was almost embarrassed to be Canadian. But the more of the world I've seen, and when I, having another home in Western Canada, I'm like, I'm really proud to be from here. Like I want to have a piece that captures what's home. Yeah. And then the other piece, literally outside of your art, is a Marc Majori, who is an American fine artist, and I got a print, and it was the Western one. Yeah. Did I show you it?
No, you just told me earlier on.
Yeah, it was a Western one, but it was like the highest, the real painting. It was the highest painting ever purchased by a living American artist.
Wow.
And the more work that I do in the States, American fine art is actually a really interesting category that is, it tells a story about the American South. And I've gotten to know Marc Majori's story. That was a story. Like even the way I explained it, it has a story.
Yeah.
When I think about how someone who has no budget, and I'm not someone that's been like, I'm an art person, I buy through stories. Yeah. And like, that just tells you that it's a thing. It's a thing.
Yes.
Like it's gotta be a thing.
But I mean, the level of story always changes. The story could be that you're inspired by, we mentioned earlier, that Kardashian helping a sale. There's a true thing that like, I have bought things in the past because I'm inspired by somebody. Like it could be a designer, it could be something. And they wore that. And I was like, well, I really I resonate with this human. That's a story. Like I think I resonate with what they stand for through the stories that they've told to the world. That means I want to wear what they're wearing. I want that watch. I want that hat, whatever it is. So I think stories are endless. Hugely.
Well, that's why influencers can be so valuable.
Yes.
Right. And why also influencers is such a tricky category is that influencers that really invest in their story, in their brand, in authenticity, they really sell.
Yeah.
Like it's insane actually at the rate that they sell for brands.
Mm-hmm.
But it comes down to like the golden rule that it has to be authentic. They have to be consistent. They have to post often. But then the second is like, there's also a lot of randomness that goes into it too, right? Like for me, like I wouldn't be a target market persona for Marc Majori's work. Like I'm a Canadian city girl with like not like only work ties to the Arizona South and like the desert North American tribes and like the cowboy community. If not for me going to Arizona to shoot for a private jet client, and the client who's also become a great friend, she was really big in American art. And she's like, and I had really liked this pop art Western piece. I was at the airport, and Billy Shank was his name. He's a fantastic artist. And I was like really impressed by the art I was seeing in Arizona, because it's by being Canadian, we see indigenous art in a different way. Like
Yes.
it's to hear it's very Haida Gwaii. Like it's the kind of those like the totem kind of shapes, like the Canucks kind of logo.
Yeah.
Whereas in Arizona, it's like you see a lot of like the turquoise. Like it feels more like the clay earth. Like it feels kind of more earth focused than nature focused. And we were just having a conversation and she's like, oh, you got to check out Mark Majori. Like he is like it. Told me the story. That's checked it out. Went on his Instagram. Like I didn't go.
Did he have one?
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
he's got a huge following.
Oh, amazing.
And I didn't go on like Art of America. I didn't go on, what is the other big one? The marketplace for art where you validate your price point.
Yeah, there's Artsy.
Yeah. I didn't go on Artsy. Like I didn't go on any of those things. I literally went on Instagram, searched him up, followed him because I just wanted to be more aspirational and feel like I knew what's up in that category than like be a collector. And then in seeing his Instagram post, he was doing a print drop and I like signed up, got myself, and it wasn't a crazy amount of money. I think it was like $1,200. But to me, like that was like a big deal. Like I was like, it's huge. Like it's a massive print.
Nice.
And, but that to me was like, it's a story. It's an experience. It's not linear. It's not like,
it's a genuine one. Like you love it. You're going to tell everybody that story.
But it's not like and that's what there's like a randomness. Like Mark Majori sitting in his studio has no idea like, the consumer journey I went to decide to purchase. Like I followed him for months before and that's the stuff.
It also took the right print at the right time to drop for you to catch it.
The right post the way that he posted it too. It's like him standing next to the piece. It was like it, and I even felt too because I'm someone that kind of more like scrolls through Instagram than like reads like every word. And I'd happened to read that caption and I was like excited that they were doing a drop and I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss the date because how sometimes it's not chronological, but to go back to like, it's all those micro things.
Yes.
Like it's all the things you can't account for. It's like stories that are being shared and said and talked about like when you're not present, while you're working, while you're sleeping, and why you need to invest in this because we wouldn't be having this conversation if we didn't invest in our brands. Exactly. You wouldn't be listening if we didn't invest in our brands. So this is the only way that this happens. It's like, just, you got to put in the time. I guess before I've got 3 questions and then we're wrapping it up.
Sweet.
NFTs. What is your opinion?
NFTs?
Be blunt.
I hate them. No. So the back end, yes. No, I actually do. The back end of the technology of having the artworks verified on the blockchain is absolutely fantastic. And I think it's necessity.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, historically, the only issues that have ever come in art are fraudulent artworks, like at the, that very next level. So I think the technology behind the blockchain validating artwork, absolutely fantastic. The problem that I hate, I mean, this is a society thing, is that it was also so abused.
How new it is.
Yeah, no, it was, the NFT like market as a whole was fantastic, but the humans that took the NFT concept and then just started making a bunch of drunk monkeys and like whatever it was, like pigs,
staplers,
and, like, whatever it was the problem. Because like at that time when we're rewinding 2-3 years ago now, whenever that big boom was, I was being offered every single day to do an NFT drop. And I had a really good friend for like 5 years ago. So 2 years before the big drop is huge into crypto. And as NFTs start to trickle up in the crypto space, like before they hit the mainstream, he was like, you got to do these. And we started doing something. Like I didn't even know what I was doing. We just did like some really silly like JPEGs. And I saw like it going up and I'm like, this is fantastic. And I just didn't get why all of these, like, we'll call them artists, because they weren't artists. Like they were just companies putting out these things, why they were being collected. And it ultimately was junk. It was all junk.
It's literally pump and dumps.
Yes. It was all pump and dump scams. So like NFTs as a whole on the crypto, like the blockchain side of the world, I love. NFT artwork, I do not.
Who would be your dream collab?
Dream collab is going to be Audemars watches. Audemars Piguet. Watch
was not expecting that.
Yeah, watch will be my number 1, and then it'll go probably Louis Vuitton, and then it'll go.
In what capacity?
Like I'll eventually be the creative director, for sure.
Like say the full sentence. Let's put it in the universe.
Oh, Anthony Ricciardi will be the creative director of Louis Vuitton, 100%. In a few years, it's gonna take a little bit of time, but I'll also do Audemars done a few of them. They just did Travis Scott like last week. They did a Travis Scott like 1 out of 100 watch for a couple $100,000. I 100% will do an Audemars. I'm going to do a couple watches before then. I think Tag Heuer's done a great job. I think Hublot's done a great job of collaborating with our artists, like very, very big artists. They've done a great job. So I definitely will do those watches as well. But I think we'll end with the Audemars. And then on the fashion side, I like so many luxury brands, like as we do. And I think that all the different things that I've done in my life, this is a really good lesson, is that like, I've had a jewelry line that we closed. I've had clothing lines. I'm wearing a polo that I just made for fun for myself. I do different things. They're really just building blocks for when I go to do my collaboration with Tiffany.
You have experience.
When I go to do my collaboration with Louis, like I've done this. I know what I'm doing. Yeah.
I love that. Okay, last question. Who is your dream collector?
Well, that's a good one. Dream collector. Oh my gosh, what? I don't know.
Like you have your painting in one person's house.
Yeah, that's a great question. Lil Wayne, I grew up like loving Lil Wayne. And one of my good friends from college ended up signing to Young Money. And for his birthday last year, we did Lil Wayne a painting. I didn't know if he ever got it. I didn't know if I dropped it off to Lil Wayne's house in Miami, but he wasn't there. So all good. Fast forward at the OVO Fest this summer, or at Drake's house, and Euro, who's my friend, looks over at Wayne and goes, because I'm sitting on the couch and Lil Wayne's right there, and I had not said hi or said anything yet. I was very nervous. I'm a huge fanboy, and he goes, Wayne, this is the guy that did your painting, the Green Bay Packers. It was a Green Bay Packers with Biggie on it. He goes, this is the guy that did your painting. And Wayne comes up to me and hugs me, and he goes, bro, I love your artwork. I need to buy more. And like gives me a genuine hug. And I was like, I remember texting Cass immediately. I'm like, I'm done. I'm retired. I never have to do another painting ever again. Lil Wayne said he likes my art. And like, I literally grew up every single day listening to Lil Wayne. So that was like I think that's already happened. So that's really crazy, because like that did happen, and it was absolutely insane. And then in his recent music video, Lil Wayne, he's walking through his house and he walks into a studio and the painting's on the wall. So it's like super crazy.
Oh my God.
So yeah, but like, who would I like want to collect my artwork? That's such a tough question. There's so many people like I admire.
I think that kind of answers the question. Like maybe it's now more like we're gunning for Louis, because
yeah, like I want to be in the collection of these big, historic fashion houses. I grew up loving like design and luxury goods. So if I can be
and you get the business of fashion, which I think is also really important.
Yeah.
I really hope that you can bring Louis Vuitton back from the dead, because I
haven't done much research on the Pharrell front. Is it not doing well?
No.
Did you like Virgil as creative director?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that he's one of the best the brand has had in the last 50 years.
Oh, really? You didn't even... Who was before that? Marc Jacobs?
Well, I think the brand was in a different place, right?
Sure.
Like I think fast fashion really transformed, and the conglomeration of LVMH changed how
it was all thought about. Yeah, for sure.
Like how it's not only all thought about, but like they all just kind of use the same marketing strategy. Like it's no longer about the brand as a brand. Like it's
under the umbrella.
Yeah. Which I think you can't really blame the creative director for that. I do think Pharrell is chasing a audience or a target market persona that's fleeting for the brand, which is dangerous.
It was what Virgil started and like had a grip on, and now Pharrell's chasing it. So you mean?
Yeah, like
I don't know. I honestly haven't done enough digging on that.
I don't want to group him into the same box. Like I find when I look at what Pharrell is doing, like the the clickbait headlines, like the $1 million purse that came out, it's ugly, and it's a very, not the price tag, but the way it looks is a very niche audience. And to me, it's screaming idiots are buying this. It's not $1 million bag because it's a piece of art. It's $1 million bag because it allows a subsection of the population to say, because someone says it's cool, I'm going to wear it. And like, it's for one Instagram post. Like it's not the way the brand should be. Like, especially when Louis Vuitton has been in a category compared to Hermès and Chanel, and even Chanel is doing the same thing. Like they're making brand decisions that they're not in the same category as Hermes. Like, and they were scarce commodities that were difficult to access, and you held on to for a lifetime because it had a store value. Like, you're not going back and buying a new color every quarter. Like, it's not the way the brand was supposed to be.
Yeah.
But because of our obsession with commodities and social media, I think has really broken what a luxury brand is supposed to mean. But I believe in you. I think you're going to be great. But like, my last question is, we're going to be doing a series on sports logos, best and worst. What's your favorite baseball logo and worst logo in baseball? It's an awkward sentence. What is your best favorite logo in baseball and your least favorite logo in baseball?
This is not being biased because I am a Boston Red Sox fan, but I think the two socks, like
it's a gorgeous logo.
It's super pretty.
Great answer.
So I think the two Red Sox are gorgeous. Worst logo,
but also what a great brand.
Yeah,
like,
fantastic, historic, nostalgic. Like, it just
even where they play.
Yeah,
Fenway Park is and they also call it the Green Monster. Like, a great brand.
Yeah, and fantastic
through and through.
Any of the logos that are like just the T for Texas, or like actually the T does have some like asterisk to it. Like the B for Boston does as well. I'm trying to think of like what's a bad logo. Like the Houston Astros, like they're like the circle with the H and the star, I don't love.
Yeah, pretty bad. CR is pretty bad. Who's that?
Yeah, the Rockies. That's really bad. But I do like their Rocky logo because each
the
company
old
has
school
a couple
like purple black hat.
Yes. Yeah. It's just ugly. Agree.
Barney.
Yeah. But I love the Jays classic one, like the vintage one.
I think Jays is a great brand.
Yeah, the Jays is great.
All over the world, I see Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah, I think they've done. Yeah,
I think they're a really. I know they're a really like revered brand because like I'll be in like,
especially like the light blue, like their blue is great, but like when they have the light blue, like
powder,
it's beautiful.
I do think though that royal blue is more their like
for sure
icon.
Yeah,
but like I've been in a small town in Japan and be like, where are you from? And I'm like, I'm from Toronto. And they're like, oh my God,
Toronto
like,
Blue.
let me go pull my hat down off the top shelf.
Yeah,
they're like, here, look, hat. And I'm like, cool. But like, I get that. I've been like in a random mountain town in Peru and they're like, Blue Jays. And I'm like, Blue Jays.
It's awesome.
Which is so funny because isn't it like our only baseball team too in Canada?
Yeah. And baseball's played around the world, so it is.
Right.
Whereas hockey, we think
Asia.
hockey would be the biggest, but like it's not nearly as big.
It's nothing.
It's not nearly as big.
It's literally nothing.
Yeah.
Like it. Yeah, that is a great logo.
Yeah.
And I also think that it's actually a good mascot.
The Blue Jay, it is a great mascot
because it's also not only like Blue Jays, I think are all over North America, but Toronto Blue Jays, like having it actually look like a Blue Jay, which I think is also great. Like so often, like the logo doesn't look like it.
I went to school in Montgomery, Alabama.
Yeah,
and there's a AA team, which is the minor league team of the Tampa Bay Rays, and the team name was the Montgomery Biscuits, like a cheese biscuit. And literally, the mascot was a big biscuit.
That's hilarious.
It's super funny.
That only works in the southern states.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Professional sports team. Crazy.
That's awesome. Well, I've loved having you. You're the best.
Thank you. It was amazing. Very grateful.
Where can people find you if they want to follow you?
Social media will be the number one. Like Ricciardi Paints on everything. So my last name, Ricciardi Paints, my website, social, TikTok, LinkedIn.
Can you spell it? Because it's
RICCIARDI Paints.
Cool. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.